When Victoria Sterling became Nashville's most sought-after wedding planner, she promised to create perfect fairy tale ceremonies. But when jealousy and obsession consumed her, she orchestrated a wedding day that would end not in celebration, but in cold-blooded murder. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Events, Nashville's premier wedding planning boutique, as Victoria Sterling reviewed the final details for what promised to be the social event of the season. At 38, Victoria had built her reputation on creating flawless celebrations for Tennessee's wealthiest families, and the upcoming Maxwell Hartley wedding represented the pinnacle of her professional achievement. Victoria's office walls were lined with photographs from hundreds of weddings she had orchestrated over the past 15 years. Smiling couples, elaborate floral arrangements, and opulent receptions that had been featured in Southern Living and Town and Country magazines. She had transformed herself from a small-town girl from rural Tennessee into Nashville's wedding planning royalty, commanding fees that rivaled those of celebrity event coordinators. But beneath Victoria's polished exterior and professional success lurked a darkness that would soon transform her greatest triumph into the setting for a meticulously planned murder. "Victoria, the Maxwell wedding is going to be absolutely spectacular," gushed her assistant, 24-year-old Melissa Crawford, as she entered the office carrying fabric samples and vendor contracts. "I can't believe how perfectly everything is coming together." Victoria's smile was practiced and professional, but her eyes held a coldness that Melissa had begun to notice more frequently in recent weeks. "Perfection is what our clients pay for," Victoria replied, her voice carrying an edge that made Melissa shift uncomfortably. The Maxwell Hartley wedding had consumed Victoria's attention for the past 8 months, not just because of its enormous budget and high-profile guest list, but because of the bride herself. 26-year-old Catherine Hartley was everything Victoria had once dreamed of being: young, beautiful, from old Nashville money, and engaged to the city's most eligible bachelor, tech entrepreneur James Maxwell. What made Victoria's obsession with Catherine particularly dangerous was that the young bride represented everything Victoria believed had been stolen from her by circumstances, timing, and what she saw as cosmic injustice. Victoria's journey to becoming Nashville's most exclusive wedding planner had been paved with sacrifices and strategic decisions that had cost her any chance at a normal personal life. Born Victoria Mae Johnson in rural Cookeville, Tennessee, she had been the daughter of a struggling farmer and a seamstress mother who took in alterations to make ends meet. From an early age, Victoria had been obsessed with wealth and elegance, spending hours poring over bridal magazines and society pages, dreaming of a life far removed from her family's modest circumstances. She had worked multiple jobs throughout high school to save money for college, where she studied business and marketing with a laser focus on entering Nashville's elite social circles. Her transformation from Victoria Johnson to Victoria Sterling had been deliberate and calculated. She had legally changed her name, invented a more sophisticated backstory, and systematically eliminated all traces of her humble origins. Even her closest business associates believed she came from established Nashville society rather than a farmhouse outside Cookeville. Victoria's success in the wedding industry had come at enormous personal cost. She had never married, rarely dated, and had no close friendships outside of her professional relationships. Her entire identity was built around creating perfect celebrations for other women, while her own romantic life remained barren and unfulfilled. The irony wasn't lost on Victoria that she had spent her entire career orchestrating dream weddings while never experiencing the love and devotion she helped other couples celebrate. She had become an expert in romance while remaining completely isolated from it, watching from the sidelines as hundreds of couples promised eternal love while she went home to an empty penthouse apartment. Victoria's resentment had grown slowly over the years, fed by countless weddings where she was treated as invisible help rather than the sophisticated professional she had worked so hard to become. She was the one who made the magic happen, yet she was rarely acknowledged in wedding photos or thank you speeches. She was essential to their happiness, but excluded from their celebrations. The arrival of Catherine Hartley in Victoria's life had awakened something dark and dangerous that had been dormant for years, a toxic combination of envy, obsession, and murderous rage that would transform a professional relationship into a deadly fixation. Victoria's first meeting with Catherine had taken place on a crisp October morning 8 months before the planned wedding date. Catherine had swept into Sterling events wearing a Burberry trench coat and carrying a Hermes handbag, her blonde hair perfectly styled and her skin glowing with the kind of health and vitality that unlimited money could maintain. "I want something magical," Catherine had said, settling into the plush chair across from Victoria's desk. "James and I have been dreaming of this day since we got engaged, and we want it to be absolutely perfect." Victoria had listened with professional attention while mentally cataloging every detail about Catherine's appearance, manner, and obvious wealth. The young woman's engagement ring was easily worth more than Victoria's annual salary, and her casual mention of a budget that wasn't really a concern confirmed that she represented the kind of client Victoria had always coveted. But what transformed Victoria's professional interest into dangerous obsession was learning about Catherine's background and the seemingly effortless path that had led to her engagement to Nashville's most eligible bachelor. Catherine Hartley came from one of Nashville's oldest and most respected families. Her great-grandfather had founded Hartley Industries, a commercial real estate empire that now controlled significant portions of downtown Nashville's development. Her father currently served as the company's CEO, while her mother, Margaret Hartley, was a prominent socialite who chaired the boards of multiple charities and cultural organizations. Catherine herself had attended the exclusive Harpeth Hall School before graduating from Vanderbilt University with a degree in art history, a field of study she had never needed to pursue professionally thanks to her family's wealth. She had spent her 20s traveling, volunteering for charitable causes, and moving through Nashville's social scene with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. Her relationship with James Maxwell had begun at a charity gala benefiting the Nashville Symphony, where they had been seated at the same table by mutual friends who thought they would make a good match. Their courtship had been conducted in the pages of society magazines and local newspapers, with every milestone celebrated as a triumph of young love and social prominence. Victoria's research into Catherine's life became increasingly detailed and invasive as her professional obligations provided perfect cover for her growing obsession with the young bride. As the wedding planner, Victoria had legitimate reasons to learn intimate details about Catherine's preferences, schedule, and personal relationships. She needed to know Catherine's favorite flowers, her dietary restrictions, her family dynamics, and her social connections to create the perfect wedding celebration. But Victoria's information gathering went far beyond professional necessity. She had obtained copies of Catherine's social media posts going back years, studying photographs of vacations, family gatherings, and social events to understand every aspect of the young woman's privileged life. Victoria knew Catherine's exercise routine, her favorite restaurants, her shopping preferences, and even her medical history through information gathered during venue accessibility discussions. Most disturbingly, Victoria had begun conducting surveillance of Catherine outside of their professional meetings. She would position herself at locations where she knew Catherine would be: her yoga studio, her favorite coffee shop, the charity organizations where she volunteered, always maintaining the pretense that their encounters were coincidental. Victoria's surveillance revealed the depth of Catherine's happiness and contentment, which only intensified the wedding planner's resentment and desire to destroy what she perceived as Catherine's undeserved good fortune. Victoria watched Catherine meet friends for lunch, laughing easily and radiating the kind of joy that comes from a life free of genuine hardship. She observed Catherine shopping with her mother, their relationship clearly close and affectionate in ways that Victoria had never experienced with her own distant family. Most painfully, she witnessed Catherine's interactions with James Maxwell, seeing the genuine love and mutual respect that characterized their relationship. The couple's obvious happiness together triggered something toxic in Victoria's psyche. She had convinced herself over the years that her professional success was compensation for her personal loneliness, but seeing Catherine's effortless combination of wealth, love, and social status made Victoria's achievements feel hollow and meaningless. Victoria's transformation from successful wedding planner to potential murderer accelerated during the winter months as her obsession with Catherine deepened and her resentment crystallized into homicidal rage. The planning meetings for the Maxwell-Hartley wedding became increasingly difficult for Victoria to endure, as Catherine's enthusiasm and gratitude highlighted everything that was missing from Victoria's own life. Catherine would arrive at each meeting glowing with happiness, eager to share details about her honeymoon plans, her new home with James, and their dreams for their future together. "Victoria, you're amazing," Catherine said during one particularly productive session. "I feel so lucky to have found you. You understand my vision perfectly, and you're making all my dreams come true." The praise that should have been professionally satisfying instead felt like salt in Victoria's wounds. She was indeed making Catherine's dreams come true, while her own dreams remained perpetually deferred. Victoria had spent 15 years creating perfect weddings for other women, while sacrificing any possibility of finding love herself. The breaking point came when Catherine invited Victoria to attend a pre-wedding celebration, a gesture of friendship that Victoria interpreted as the ultimate insult and the catalyst for her decision to commit murder. "I know this is probably unusual," Catherine said during a late January planning meeting, "but I'd love for you to come to my bachelorette party next month. You've become such an important part of this whole process, and it wouldn't feel right to celebrate without you there." Victoria's smile was perfectly composed as she accepted the invitation, but internally she was seething with rage at Catherine's condescending kindness. The invitation was clearly meant as a generous gesture, but Victoria saw it as evidence of how Catherine viewed her, as hired help who was being granted the privilege of witnessing her employer's happiness. The bachelorette party, held at the exclusive Belle Meade Country Club, was everything Victoria had expected. 30 of Nashville's most privileged young women celebrating Catherine's upcoming marriage with expensive champagne, designer party favors, and the kind of effortless elegance that money could provide. Victoria found herself relegated to the role of outsider looking in, watching women her own age who had achieved everything she had wanted but never obtained. That night, Victoria made the decision that would transform her from wedding planner to murderer. She would ensure that Catherine's wedding day would be her last day alive. Victoria's method of murder was as elegant and sophisticated as the weddings she planned. She would use her position as wedding planner to orchestrate Catherine's death during the reception, creating a scenario that would appear to be a tragic accident while ensuring that suspicion would never fall on her. The plan required months of preparation and research into untraceable poisons, methods of delivery, and ways to establish alibis that would withstand police investigation. Victoria's intelligence and attention to detail, qualities that had made her successful in the wedding industry, now served a far more sinister purpose. Victoria's weapon of choice was aconitine, a deadly alkaloid derived from the monkshood plant that would cause rapid cardiac arrest while mimicking the symptoms of a severe allergic reaction. Victoria had spent weeks researching botanical poisons that would be difficult to detect in post-mortem examinations, especially in the chaos and confusion that would follow a medical emergency at a wedding reception. Aconitine was perfect for her purposes. It was rapidly absorbed, caused symptoms that could be attributed to anaphylactic shock, and would be virtually undetectable unless investigators specifically tested for plant alkaloids. The poison would be administered through Catherine's signature wedding cocktail, a custom champagne-based drink that Victoria had designed specifically for the occasion. Only Catherine would receive the poisoned version, ensuring that no other guests would be harmed and that suspicion would focus on accidental contamination rather than deliberate murder. Victoria had also researched the medical response protocols at the wedding venue and identified the nearest hospital's emergency procedures. She calculated that even with immediate medical attention, the dose of aconitine she planned to administer would be fatal within minutes, making successful treatment virtually impossible. Victoria's plan included multiple layers of misdirection and false evidence designed to prevent investigators from identifying her as the perpetrator. In addition to the poisoning itself, Victoria had prepared elaborate alibis and planted evidence that would point suspicion toward other potential culprits. She had researched the backgrounds of all vendor personnel and identified a catering server with a previous drug arrest who could be implicated if necessary. Victoria had also created false documentation suggesting that Catherine had been receiving threatening letters from an unidentified stalker, letters that Victoria had written herself using techniques she had researched to avoid handwriting analysis. These letters would be discovered after Catherine's death and would provide investigators with an alternative theory of the crime. Most deviously, Victoria had prepared evidence suggesting that Catherine had been struggling with depression and anxiety about her upcoming marriage, information that could support a narrative of suicide if other explanations proved unsatisfactory. Victoria had even planted fake therapy appointment cards and prescription medication in Catherine's belongings that would be found during the investigation. The week before the wedding, Victoria's behavior became increasingly erratic as the pressure of maintaining her double life took its toll on her psychological stability. Melissa Crawford noticed that her boss was working even longer hours than usual, often staying at the Sterling events office until after midnight and arriving before dawn. Victoria's normally impeccable appearance was showing signs of strain, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands, and an intensity of focus that bordered on manic. "Victoria, are you feeling okay?" Melissa asked during one of their final planning sessions. "You seem really stressed, even more than usual for a wedding this size. Maybe you should consider taking a vacation after the Maxwell wedding." Victoria's laugh was sharp and brittle. "After this weekend, everything will be different," she replied cryptically. "I won't need a vacation because all my problems will be solved." The comment was concerning enough that Melissa made a mental note to discuss Victoria's behavior with the company's other senior planner. But the chaos of final wedding preparations pushed the conversation to the back of her mind. Victoria's final preparations included multiple backup plans and contingencies designed to ensure that Catherine would not survive her wedding day, regardless of what unexpected complications might arise. In addition to the aconitine in Catherine's cocktail, Victoria had prepared secondary poisoning methods that could be deployed if her primary plan failed. She had access to the wedding cake, the floral arrangements, and even Catherine's bridal suite, providing multiple opportunities to administer fatal doses of various toxins. Victoria had also researched the layout and security systems of the wedding venue, identifying escape routes and methods for destroying evidence if her involvement was discovered. She had prepared false identification documents and travel arrangements that would allow her to disappear immediately after Catherine's death if suspicion began to focus on her. Most importantly, Victoria had convinced herself that her plan was not just foolproof, but morally justified. In her distorted thinking, Catherine's death would be a form of cosmic justice that would restore balance to a universe that had unfairly distributed happiness and success. The day of the Maxwell-Hartley wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony that Victoria had planned with such meticulous attention to detail. Victoria arrived at Cheekwood Estate, the historic mansion and botanical garden where the wedding would take place, at 5 in the morning to oversee the setup of flowers, lighting, and decorations. The venue had been transformed into a fairy tale setting with thousands of white roses, cascading greenery, and elegant lighting that would create a magical atmosphere for the evening reception. The early morning hours provided Victoria with the privacy she needed to make her final preparations for Catherine's murder. She carefully prepared the poisoned cocktail ingredients and stored them in a secure location where only she would have access during the reception. She also made final adjustments to the seating arrangements and vendor schedules to ensure that she would be in the right position to execute her plan when the critical moment arrived. As the morning progressed and vendor teams began arriving to complete the wedding setup, Victoria moved through the organized chaos with practiced efficiency, appearing to be simply a dedicated professional, ensuring that every detail was perfect. "Victoria, everything looks absolutely incredible," Catherine said when she arrived at the venue for her bridal preparations. "I can't believe it's finally happening." "This is even more beautiful than I imagined." Victoria accepted Catherine's enthusiastic embrace while mentally preparing for what would be the young woman's final day alive. "You deserve every bit of magic we've created," Victoria replied, the words carrying a double meaning that Catherine couldn't possibly understand. Catherine's happiness was radiant and infectious, making it difficult for even the most cynical vendors to remain unmoved by her joy. She moved through the preparation areas like sunshine personified, thanking everyone involved in creating her perfect day and expressing genuine gratitude for their efforts. Victoria watched Catherine's interactions with growing resentment, seeing in the bride's natural warmth and kindness all the qualities that made her own life feel hollow and meaningless. "Mrs. Sterling," said David Chen, the reception venue coordinator, "we've completed the setup for the cocktail service area. Should we begin preparing the signature drinks for the reception?" Victoria's pulse quickened as she realized the moment was approaching when she would need to prepare Catherine's final cocktail. "Not yet," she replied carefully. "I want to personally oversee the preparation of the bride's special drink to ensure it's absolutely perfect." Chen nodded respectfully, accustomed to Victoria's attention to detail and perfectionist standards. He had worked with Sterling events on dozens of previous weddings and knew that Victoria's insistence on controlling every aspect of the celebration was what made her one of Nashville's most sought-after planners. Victoria spent the afternoon monitoring every aspect of the wedding preparations while secretly counting down the hours until she would implement her plan to murder Catherine during the reception celebration. The ceremony itself proceeded flawlessly, with 300 guests gathered in Cheekwood's stunning outdoor amphitheater to witness Catherine and James exchange vows among blooming azaleas and ancient oak trees. Victoria positioned herself at the back of the ceremony area, ostensibly coordinating with vendors, but actually studying Catherine's radiant happiness and preparing herself psychologically for the murder she would commit within hours. Catherine looked absolutely stunning in her custom Vera Wang gown, a masterpiece of French lace and silk that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. Her joy was unmistakable as she spoke her vows to James, promising a lifetime of love and devotion that Victoria knew would last only a few more hours. But as the ceremony concluded and guests moved toward the reception area, Victoria had no idea that her elaborate murder plan was about to be complicated by the presence of someone trained to recognize and prevent exactly the kind of crime she was planning to commit. Detective Sarah Martinez of the Nashville Metro Police Department was attending the Maxwell Hartley wedding as the guest of her college roommate, Rebecca Walsh, who was serving as one of Catherine's bridesmaids. Martinez had initially been reluctant to attend such a high-profile social event, preferring to spend her weekends away from crowds and complications, but Rebecca had insisted that the wedding would be fun and relaxing. Martinez had worked in Nashville Metro's homicide division for 12 years, specializing in cases involving poisoning and other forms of calculated murder. Her expertise in investigating sophisticated crimes had made her particularly sensitive to unusual behavioral patterns and suspicious activities, skills that she couldn't completely turn off even during social events. During the cocktail hour preceding dinner, Martinez had noticed Victoria Sterling moving through the reception area with unusual intensity and focus. While other vendors seemed relaxed and celebratory as the event proceeded smoothly, Victoria appeared tense and hyper-vigilant, constantly monitoring Catherine's location and activities with an attention that seemed excessive even for a perfectionist wedding planner. Martinez's investigative instincts were triggered when she observed Victoria preparing Catherine's signature cocktail with secretive precision and unusual security measures. "That wedding planner is really something," Martinez commented to Rebecca as they watched Victoria isolate herself in a corner of the bar area to prepare Catherine's special drink. "I've never seen someone so intense about cocktail preparation." Rebecca laughed, raising her own champagne glass in appreciation of the elegant reception. "Victoria is famous for being a perfectionist. Catherine says she's been incredible throughout the whole planning process, like having a wedding fairy godmother who makes sure every single detail is absolutely perfect." But Martinez's trained eye was picking up details that civilian guests would miss: Victoria's excessive secrecy during drink preparation, her obvious anxiety despite the wedding's smooth progression, and most concerning, the way her attention focused on Catherine with an intensity that seemed more personal than professional. Martinez decided to engage Victoria directly, using casual conversation to assess whether her suspicions about the wedding planner's behavior were justified. "Excuse me," Martinez said, approaching Victoria with a friendly smile as the wedding planner finished preparing Catherine's cocktail. "I'm Sarah Martinez, friend of the bride. That drink looks absolutely beautiful. What's the special ingredient that makes it unique?" Victoria's reaction was immediately defensive and suspicious, her body language shifting to protect the cocktail from Martinez's proximity. "It's a proprietary recipe I created specifically for Catherine," she replied, her voice tight with barely concealed anxiety. "The exact proportions are a professional secret. Martinez's investigative training had taught her to recognize when people were lying or concealing important information, and Victoria's response triggered every alarm bell in her professional consciousness. The wedding planner's explanation was plausible on the surface, but her nervous energy and protective behavior suggested something far more sinister than trade secret protection. "Well, it certainly looks gorgeous," Martinez continued, studying Victoria's facial expressions and body language for additional clues. "Catherine is so lucky to have someone who cares about every detail of her special day." Victoria's response to this seemingly innocent comment revealed the depth of her psychological disturbance and confirmed Martinez's growing suspicions that something dangerous was happening. "Yes, Catherine is very lucky," Victoria said, her voice carrying undertones of bitterness and resentment that were completely inappropriate for a wedding celebration. "Some people just seem to get everything they want without any effort or sacrifice." The comment was revealing enough to convince Martinez that Victoria's relationship with Catherine involved emotional dynamics that went far beyond professional service provision. Combined with the secretive cocktail preparation and Victoria's obvious tension, Martinez began to suspect that she was witnessing the final stages of something criminal. Martinez's decision to trust her instincts and take action would ultimately save Catherine's life and expose Victoria's carefully planned murder scheme. But in that moment, she faced the delicate challenge of preventing a potential crime without destroying an innocent person's reputation if her suspicions proved unfounded. The critical moment arrived when Victoria approached Catherine with the specially prepared cocktail, presenting it with elaborate ceremony as the bride's signature drink for her special toast to married life. Martinez watched from across the reception area as Catherine accepted the drink with grateful enthusiasm, raising the crystal glass toward her lips just as Victoria had planned. The sight of Catherine preparing to consume what Martinez increasingly suspected was a poisoned cocktail prompted immediate action based on pure investigative instinct. "Catherine!" Martinez called out, moving quickly through the crowd of wedding guests. "Wait just a moment. I wanted to get a photograph of you with that beautiful drink before you taste it. The way the light hits the glass is absolutely perfect." Catherine paused with the glass halfway to her lips, smiling warmly at Martinez's request. "Of course. I love how beautiful everything looks tonight. Victoria has made everything so perfect." While Martinez pretended to fumble with her phone camera, she was actually studying Victoria's reaction to the interruption and confirming her suspicions about the wedding planner's murderous intentions. Victoria's face had gone pale at Martinez's intervention, and she seemed to be struggling to control her breathing and maintain her composure. Her reaction was completely disproportionate to a simple photography request, suggesting that the interruption had disrupted something far more significant than a ceremonial toast. "Actually, Catherine," Martinez said, making her decision to act on her suspicions, "let me taste that cocktail first. I'm always looking for new recipes to try at home, and that looks absolutely delicious." Victoria's response was immediate and panicked. "No," she said sharply, reaching for the glass. "That drink is specifically calibrated for Catherine's tastes. The proportions wouldn't be right for anyone else." The explanation made no logical sense, and Victoria's desperate attempt to prevent anyone else from tasting the cocktail confirmed Martinez's worst fears about what was happening. In that moment, she realized she was witnessing an attempted murder disguised as wedding hospitality. Martinez's training and experience had prepared her for exactly this type of situation, and she acted with the swift decisiveness that had made her successful in law enforcement. "Catherine, please don't drink that," Martinez said firmly, taking the crystal glass from the bride's hand, despite Victoria's increasingly frantic protests. There's something wrong here, and I need everyone to step back while we sort this out." The confrontation that followed revealed Victoria's complete psychological breakdown as her carefully planned murder scheme collapsed around her. She alternated between denying any wrongdoing and making increasingly incoherent statements about Catherine not deserving her perfect life and happiness. "She has everything," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face as hotel security responded to Martinez's call for assistance. "Everything I worked for, everything I should have had. It's not fair that someone like her gets to be happy while someone like me has nothing." Victoria's confession and emotional breakdown provided immediate confirmation of Martinez's suspicions and revealed the true nature of the deadly plot that had been disguised as wedding planning. "I gave her everything," Victoria continued, her voice rising as her psychological control completely dissolved. "I created the perfect wedding, the perfect day, everything she ever dreamed of. And what do I get? Nothing. I go home alone while she gets to live happily ever after with Prince Charming." James Maxwell, who had rushed to Catherine's side when the confrontation began, struggled to understand what was happening. "Victoria, what are you talking about? You're our wedding planner. We trusted you." "Trust," Victoria laughed bitterly. "You trusted me to make your dreams come true while I sacrificed everything for your happiness. 15 years of creating perfect weddings for other people while my own life stayed empty and meaningless." The wedding guests watched in horrified fascination as Victoria's professional mask completely disappeared, revealing the disturbed individual who had been hiding behind years of careful presentation and calculated charm. The arrival of Nashville Metro police officers transformed the wedding reception into a crime scene as investigators began the process of documenting Victoria's attempted murder and gathering evidence for prosecution. Detective Lieutenant Michael Torres, Martinez's supervisor, arrived within minutes of her emergency call and immediately took charge of the crime scene. Victoria was placed under arrest and read her rights, while the poisoned cocktail was secured as evidence for forensic analysis. "Sarah, good catch," Torres said privately to Martinez as they watched Victoria being led away in handcuffs. "Whatever you saw that made you suspicious probably saved this woman's life." The guests were interviewed individually to document their observations of Victoria's behavior throughout the evening, while forensic technicians processed the bar area where the poisoned cocktail had been prepared. The investigation would eventually reveal the full scope of Victoria's planning and preparation for Catherine's murder. The analysis of Victoria's poisoned cocktail revealed a lethal dose of aconitine that would have killed Catherine within minutes of consumption, confirming that Martinez had prevented a carefully planned and sophisticated murder. Dr. Patricia Wells, the forensic toxicologist who analyzed the cocktail, reported that the poison concentration was precisely calculated to ensure rapid death while mimicking the symptoms of anaphylactic shock. "This wasn't a crime of passion, Doctor," Wells explained. "Someone with extensive knowledge of plant toxins prepared this poison specifically to kill the intended victim." The investigation also uncovered evidence of Victoria's extensive surveillance and stalking of Catherine, including hundreds of photographs, detailed schedules of the bride's activities, and research into methods of murder that would be difficult to detect. Victoria's apartment contained a shrine-like collection of materials related to Catherine's life and upcoming wedding. Most disturbing was the discovery that Catherine had not been Victoria's first intended victim. The wedding planner had researched and stalked several other clients over the years, apparently selecting targets based on their youth, beauty, and apparent happiness, qualities that triggered Victoria's homicidal jealousy. The investigation revealed that Victoria's attempted murder of Catherine was the culmination of years of escalating resentment and psychological deterioration that had transformed professional envy into deadly obsession. Victoria's computer files contained detailed research into the backgrounds and personal lives of dozens of former clients, with particular attention paid to young, wealthy brides who seemed to embody everything Victoria felt she had been denied. She had created elaborate psychological profiles and vulnerability assessments for potential victims, always looking for opportunities to insert herself into their lives and ultimately destroy their happiness. The forensic analysis also revealed that Victoria had been experimenting with various poisons and delivery methods for months, testing different substances on laboratory animals to determine their effectiveness and detectability. Her apartment contained a sophisticated chemistry setup that she had used to purify and concentrate the aconitine used in Catherine's cocktail. Most chilling was the discovery of Victoria's detailed journal entries documenting her fantasies about Catherine's death and her plans for assuming aspects of the bride's identity and lifestyle after the murder. Victoria had convinced herself that killing Catherine would somehow transfer the young woman's happiness and good fortune to her. Victoria Sterling was charged with attempted murder in the first degree, stalking, and multiple counts of assault with a deadly weapon, while the investigation into her other potential victims continued. During her initial court appearance, Victoria showed no remorse for her actions and continued to express resentment toward Catherine and other former clients who she believed had been unfairly blessed with happiness. Her inability to recognize the criminality of her behavior concerned both prosecutors and mental health professionals evaluating her fitness for trial. The case attracted national media attention as details of Victoria's sophisticated murder plot and extensive stalking activities became public. The wedding industry implemented new background check procedures and psychological screening protocols designed to identify potentially dangerous service providers before they could gain access to vulnerable clients. Catherine and James Maxwell were profoundly traumatized by the revelation that their trusted wedding planner had been planning Catherine's murder throughout the entire 8-month planning process. They required extensive therapy to process the violation of trust and the realization that someone they had considered almost a friend had wanted to destroy their happiness. The trial of Victoria Sterling became a landmark case in the prosecution of crimes motivated by professional jealousy and social resentment. During the 3-week trial, prosecutors presented evidence of Victoria's extensive planning, her sophisticated knowledge of poisons, and her complete lack of remorse for attempting to murder an innocent woman. The defense team argued that Victoria suffered from severe mental illness that prevented her from understanding the nature of her actions, but psychiatric evaluations revealed that she was capable of complex planning and understood the legal consequences of murder. Catherine's testimony was particularly powerful as she described her shock at learning that someone she had trusted and grown fond of had been planning to kill her throughout their entire professional relationship. "I thought Victoria cared about me," Catherine said through tears. "I invited her to my bachelorette party because I considered her a friend. The idea that she was planning my murder the entire time is something I'll never fully understand." James Maxwell testified about the impact of Victoria's crime on their marriage and their ongoing concerns about safety and trust. "We'll never feel completely safe again," he said. "The idea that someone can hide such hatred behind professional competence makes it difficult to trust anyone in our personal lives." Detective Martinez's testimony explained how her law enforcement training had enabled her to recognize the warning signs of Victoria's criminal behavior and take action to prevent Catherine's murder. "Victoria Sterling exhibited classic signs of someone planning to commit a violent crime," Martinez explained to the jury. "Her excessive attention to the victim, her secretive behavior during drink preparation, and her inappropriate emotional responses to normal social interactions all indicated that something dangerous was happening." Martinez's testimony helped establish new training protocols for law enforcement officers attending social events, emphasizing the importance of remaining alert to criminal behavior, even during off-duty activities. Her quick thinking and decisive action had prevented what could have been one of Nashville's most shocking murders. The forensic evidence presented during the trial included the analysis of Victoria's poisoned cocktail, her extensive surveillance materials, and her journal entries documenting her escalating hatred toward Catherine and other former clients. The sheer volume of evidence demonstrated the premeditated nature of Victoria's crime and her sophisticated planning abilities. Victoria Sterling was ultimately convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would never again have the opportunity to target innocent victims. During her sentencing hearing, Victoria continued to show no remorse for her actions and even suggested that Catherine should be grateful for the attention and careful planning that had gone into her intended murder. "I gave her the most beautiful wedding anyone could imagine," Victoria said. "She should appreciate the time and effort I invested in making her final day perfect." Judge Patricia Harrison, who presided over the case, condemned Victoria's complete lack of empathy and her inability to understand the gravity of her crimes. "Miss Sterling represents a clear danger to society," the judge said. "Her ability to hide her violent intentions behind professional competence makes her particularly dangerous to future potential victims." The families of Victoria's potential victims attended the sentencing hearing, with many expressing relief that she would never again be able to use her professional access to target vulnerable clients during emotionally significant events. 5 years after Victoria's conviction, the wedding industry continued to implement safety measures designed to prevent similar crimes from occurring. Professional organizations began requiring extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and ongoing monitoring of wedding planners and other service providers who had intimate access to clients' personal lives. Training programs were developed to help industry professionals recognize signs of inappropriate attachment or obsessive behavior among their colleagues. Catherine and James Maxwell had recovered from the trauma of their wedding day experience and had become advocates for victims' rights and professional accountability in service industries. They established a foundation that provided support for crime victims and funded research into preventing violence in professional relationships. Detective Sarah Martinez continued her work in homicide investigation and became a nationally recognized expert in crimes involving professional predators. She frequently spoke at law enforcement conferences about the importance of recognizing criminal behavior in seemingly normal social and professional contexts. The Sterling Events Office remained empty for 2 years after Victoria's arrest before being converted into a victim advocacy center that provided support for families affected by violent crimes. Melissa Crawford, Victoria's former assistant, struggled for months to understand how she had worked so closely with someone capable of such violence without recognizing the warning signs. She eventually started her own wedding planning business with strict ethical guidelines and mandatory mental health support for all employees. The Cheekwood estate, where Victoria had planned to commit murder, implemented enhanced security protocols and background check requirements for all event vendors. The venue's management worked closely with law enforcement to develop procedures for identifying and preventing potential threats during private events. The case of Victoria Sterling became required reading in criminal justice programs and psychology courses across the country as an example of how professional jealousy and untreated mental illness could escalate to attempted murder. Dr. Patricia Wells, who had conducted Victoria's psychological evaluation, published extensive research on the case that helped law enforcement agencies and mental health professionals better understand the warning signs of professional predators. Her work emphasized the importance of recognizing how access to vulnerable clients could be weaponized by individuals with personality disorders. The case also prompted broader discussions about the psychological screening of individuals who worked in personal service industries and the need for better communication between professional organizations when concerns arose about potentially dangerous practitioners. Victoria's attempt to turn celebration into tragedy had been prevented by alert observation and quick action, but her case served as a permanent reminder that evil could hide behind the most elegant and professional facades. The wedding planner who had promised to create perfect days had instead planned perfect murder. But her victim survived, her scheme was exposed, and justice was served before she could destroy the happiness she had envied so desperately. Victoria Sterling's legacy was not the destruction she had planned, but the increased awareness and improved safety measures that resulted from her exposure as a predator. Her sophisticated planning and professional access had nearly enabled her to commit the perfect crime, but her psychological instability and Detective Martinez's trained observation had prevented the tragedy she had orchestrated. The empty reception hall at Cheekwood Estate, where Victoria had planned Catherine's final moments, was eventually restored and returned to hosting celebrations of love and commitment. But the venue now carried the weight of what had almost happened there, serving as a reminder that even the most beautiful occasions could harbor deadly intentions. Victoria's attempt to transform joy into sorrow, celebration into mourning, and trust into betrayal had failed because of one detective's willingness to act on her instincts and one bride's luck in having a trained observer among her wedding guests. The perfect murder had been prevented by imperfect timing and the presence of someone who recognized danger when others saw only professional dedication. Years later, when wedding industry professionals discussed the most dangerous threats to client safety, Victoria Sterling's name would always be mentioned as a cautionary tale about the potential for evil to hide behind competence, charm, and professional success. The case had fundamentally changed how the wedding industry approached background checks, client relationships, and professional boundaries. Victoria's ability to maintain her facade for 15 years while planning increasingly sophisticated crimes had demonstrated that traditional screening methods were inadequate for identifying sophisticated predators. New protocols required ongoing psychological evaluations, peer reporting systems, and regular reviews of client interactions to identify inappropriate attachments or concerning behavioral patterns. The goal was to prevent future Victoria Sterlings from using professional access to target vulnerable clients during life's most important celebrations. Catherine Maxwell, now Catherine Maxwell Hartley, by her own choice to honor both family names, had found peace with her experience and had channeled her trauma into advocacy work that helped other crime victims rebuild their lives. Her foundation provided support for individuals who had been targeted by trusted professionals, recognizing that betrayal of professional trust created unique psychological challenges for survivors. Detective Sarah Martinez retired from active law enforcement after 25 years of service, but continued to consult on cases involving professional predators and sophisticated murder plots. Martinez's intervention at the Maxwell Hartley wedding had become legendary within law enforcement circles, cited as an example of how off-duty officers could prevent crimes through alert observation and decisive action. Her ability to recognize Victoria's criminal intentions, despite the wedding planner's careful facade, had saved a life and exposed a serial predator who could have claimed multiple victims. The detective's instincts and training had cut through Victoria's professional competence and social respectability to identify the dangerous individual hiding beneath the surface. Her willingness to trust her suspicions and take action despite the risk of embarrassment had prevented what could have been Nashville's most shocking murder. Victoria Sterling remained in prison, showing no signs of rehabilitation or remorse for her crimes, even after years of incarceration and mandatory psychological treatment. Prison psychologists reported that Victoria continued to express resentment toward Catherine and other former clients, maintaining her belief that successful, happy women were somehow responsible for her own life's disappointments. She showed no understanding of how her actions had affected her victims or their families, focusing instead on her own perceived injustices and missed opportunities. Victoria's case had become a textbook example of narcissistic personality disorder combined with professional access to potential victims. Her inability to develop empathy or accept responsibility for her actions made her an ongoing subject of study for forensic psychologists, interested in understanding how certain individuals could plan sophisticated crimes while maintaining apparent social functionality. The wedding planner, who had once been Nashville's most sought-after professional, had become a cautionary tale about the potential for dangerous individuals to infiltrate trusted positions and use their access to target vulnerable clients. The transformation of Victoria Sterling from successful businesswoman to convicted murderer served as a powerful reminder that professional success and social respectability could mask the most dangerous criminal intentions. Her case had changed how society viewed trusted professionals and had emphasized the importance of maintaining healthy skepticism even when dealing with highly recommended service providers. The lesson was not to become paranoid about every professional interaction, but to remain alert to warning signs and trust instincts when something felt wrong. Victoria's sophisticated planning and near-perfect execution had demonstrated that modern criminals could be highly intelligent, professionally competent, and socially skilled while still posing extreme dangers to their victims. Her ability to maintain her facade for 15 years while developing increasingly dangerous obsessions had shown that traditional methods of identifying threats were inadequate for detecting sophisticated predators. The wedding industry's response to Victoria's crimes had created new standards for professional conduct and client protection that were eventually adopted by other personal service industries. Hairstylists, photographers, caterers, and other professionals who worked closely with clients during emotionally significant events began implementing similar screening and monitoring procedures. The recognition that professional access could be weaponized by disturbed individuals had prompted widespread changes in how personal service industries approached client relationships and professional boundaries. Training programs were developed to help service providers recognize inappropriate emotional attachments to clients and establish healthy professional boundaries. The goal was to prevent the kind of obsessive relationship that had developed between Victoria and Catherine from evolving into dangerous fixation. The Maxwell-Hartley wedding, which should have been remembered as a celebration of love and commitment, instead became known as the event where a murder was prevented and a predator was exposed. Catherine and James had eventually held a small private ceremony to properly celebrate their marriage without the trauma and publicity that had surrounded their original wedding day. They had invited only immediate family and a few close friends, focusing on the joy and love that Victoria's actions had nearly destroyed. The couple's recovery from their traumatic experience had been aided by extensive therapy and their commitment to turning their experience into something positive through their advocacy work. They had refused to let Victoria's hatred and jealousy define their marriage or diminish their happiness. The empty office where Sterling Events had once operated was eventually converted into a training center for law enforcement officers specializing in crimes involving professional predators. The center offered courses on recognizing warning signs of dangerous professional relationships, investigating crimes committed by trusted individuals, and supporting victims who had been betrayed by service providers. Detective Martinez served as the lead instructor, sharing her experience from the Maxwell-Hartley case and other investigations involving professional predators. The transformation of Victoria's former workplace into a center for preventing similar crimes represented a form of poetic justice. The space where she had planned murder was now dedicated to protecting future potential victims from individuals like herself. 10 years after Victoria Sterling's conviction, her case continued to influence criminal justice education, professional training programs, and public awareness about the potential dangers of trusting service providers without proper verification. Law enforcement academies included her case in their curricula as an example of how criminals could use professional competence to mask dangerous intentions. The lesson emphasized the importance of looking beyond surface appearances and professional credentials when evaluating potential threats. Mental health professionals studied Victoria's case to better understand how personality disorders could manifest in professional settings and how early intervention might prevent the escalation from inappropriate behavior to violent crime. Her case had contributed to improved diagnostic criteria and treatment protocols for individuals showing signs of dangerous professional attachments. The story of Victoria Sterling served as a permanent reminder that evil could wear the most respectable faces and that vigilance was required to protect society's most vulnerable members from those who would exploit their trust. Victoria's transformation from trusted professional to attempted murderer had shattered assumptions about the relationship between social respectability and criminal behavior. Her case had demonstrated that intelligence, competence, and professional success could coexist with the most dangerous criminal intentions. The wedding planner who had built her career on creating perfect celebrations had tried to orchestrate perfect murder, but her scheme had been thwarted by one detective's trained instincts and willingness to act on suspicion. Victoria's carefully planned crime had failed because of an imperfect moment and a guardian angel in the form of an off-duty police officer. In the end, Victoria Sterling's greatest failure was not that her murder plot was discovered, but that she had allowed her envy and resentment to transform her from someone who created joy into someone who planned to destroy it. The woman who had spent 15 years making other people's dreams come true had ultimately revealed herself to be someone who couldn't bear to see others achieve the happiness that had eluded her. Her professional success had masked a profound emptiness that she had tried to fill by destroying what she couldn't possess. Victoria Sterling's deadly lesson was that professional competence and social respectability were no guarantee of moral character, and that the most dangerous predators were often those who appeared most trustworthy and accomplished. Her failed attempt to commit the perfect murder had instead created the perfect cautionary tale about the need for vigilance in protecting innocence from those who would destroy it. The wedding planner's perfect murder had been prevented by imperfect circumstances, but the impact of her crimes would continue to protect future victims long after Victoria Sterling herself was forgotten in her prison cell, where she would spend the rest of her life paying for her attempt to transform celebration into tragedy. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.